Listen, rookie, around here you earn respect. You don't walk in here expecting it.
I didn't come here to demand respect, Sergeant. I came here to earn it.
Here are Sonny Town Charter.
Take your time, Carter. Maybe one day they'll let you do real police work.
Every job deserves to be done right, Sergeant.
They're not escaping through the front entrance. They'll move the hostages underground. They're using the garage as their exit. Captain, that's not on the tactical report.
The Monday morning briefing at the 18th precinct in downtown Chicago was louder than usual. Police officers filled the squad room with casual conversations, coffee cups, and the familiar sound of radios crackling in the background. Detectives reviewed case files while patrol officers joked about the previous night's arrests. It looked like any ordinary shift change. Until the front door opened. A black woman in her mid-30s stepped inside carrying a single duffel bag. She wore a neatly pressed patrol uniform without a single wrinkle. Her badge shined under the fluorescent lights, and her boots looked polished enough to reflect the floor beneath them. Her posture was straight, disciplined, almost military. She paused just inside the doorway, quietly taking in the room before offering a warm smile. "Good morning." Only a handful of officers glanced in her direction. Most quickly returned to their conversations. One man didn't. Sergeant Richard Collins leaned back against a desk, crossed his arms, and slowly looked her up and down. 25 years on the force had convinced him he could judge a police officer within seconds. He smirked. "So," his voice carried across the room. "This must be our new transfer." Several officers turned toward the woman. She nodded politely. "Officer Maya Carter." She extended her hand. "It's a pleasure to." Collins ignored it completely. Instead, he looked toward the rest of the room. "Anyone know where headquarters found this one?" A few officers chuckled. Another shrugged. "Probably another fast-track academy graduate." Someone near the coffee machine laughed. "Or another diversity hire." More laughter followed. Maya slowly lowered her hand. Her smile never disappeared. "I'm looking forward to working with all of you." Collins walked around her in a slow circle like he was inspecting a recruit. "You ever worked real patrol?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Where?" "I've served in several departments." "Several." He raised an eyebrow. "Couldn't keep a job?" A louder burst of laughter echoed through the squad room. Maya answered calmly. "I accepted assignments where I was needed." Collins shook his head dramatically. "Listen, officer." He deliberately looked at her name tag. "Carter. This isn't some quiet suburban police department." He pointed toward the city visible through the station windows. "Out there. People don't care about your resume. They care whether you survive." Maya nodded once. "I understand." Her calmness irritated him even more. Most rookies became defensive. Others tried too hard to impress. This woman did neither. Collins glanced toward the duty board. "Fine. If you're so eager." He grabbed a clipboard and dropped it onto a nearby desk. "You can spend your morning organizing evidence inventory." Several officers exchanged knowing smiles. Everyone understood what Collins was doing. Evidence inventory wasn't difficult. It was tedious. Mind-numbingly boring. The assignment was reserved for officers someone wanted out of the way. Maya picked up the clipboard. "Yes, Sergeant." No complaint. No hesitation. No frustration. Just professionalism. As she walked toward the evidence room, two younger officers whispered loudly enough for her to hear. She didn't even argue. "Maybe she's scared." Another voice answered. "Or maybe she knows she's in over her head." Laughter followed once again. Inside the evidence room, Maya quietly closed the door behind her. Rows of metal shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with carefully labeled boxes and sealed evidence bags. She placed the clipboard on a table and slowly removed a small leather notebook from her duffel bag. On the first page, she wrote only a few words. First impressions. She began making careful notes. Leadership through intimidation, public ridicule accepted as humor, young officers afraid to speak, respect earned through fear instead of integrity. She closed the notebook. Outside, the laughter continued. Inside, Maya remained completely composed. She had not come to the precinct expecting kindness. She had come searching for the truth. And after less than 15 minutes inside the building, The officers had already revealed far more about themselves than they could ever imagine. None of them realized that the quiet woman they had just mocked wasn't simply another transfer officer. By the end of the day, every badge in that precinct would answer to her. The evidence room was the quietest place in the entire precinct. Outside, laughter drifted through the hallway. Phones rang endlessly. Officers exchanged stories about arrests and traffic stops, while the steady hum of police radios echoed from the squad room. Inside, however, only silence remained. Officer Maya Carter carefully placed another sealed evidence box onto a metal shelf before checking its inventory number against the clipboard Sergeant Richard Collins had handed her. The assignment was intentionally degrading. Everyone knew it. A veteran officer would never have been sent to organize years of dusty evidence on their first day. It was busy work. A message disguised as an order. Asterisk, you don't belong here. Asterisk, yet Maya performed the task with the same precision she had used throughout her entire career. Every label faced forward. Every document was double-checked. Every chain of custody form was corrected where necessary. Within an hour, she had already discovered 6 filing mistakes that could have jeopardized future criminal cases. She quietly fixed every one of them, without seeking recognition, without writing anyone's name down, because she wasn't there to embarrass officers. She was there to understand them. Maya had learned years earlier that people rarely revealed their true character during interviews or performance reviews. They revealed it when they believed no one important was watching. That belief had shaped her entire career. Long before joining law enforcement, Maya had served 8 years in the United States Army Military Police Corps. She had deployed overseas twice, leading investigations involving military personnel under enormous pressure. During one mission, her calm leadership helped evacuate dozens of civilians trapped inside a conflict zone without a single casualty. When she returned home, she joined the FBI as part of a joint violent crimes task force. Over the next decade, she dismantled organized crime networks, investigated police corruption, and coordinated hostage rescue operations across multiple states. Her name became well known inside federal law enforcement. Not because she chased publicity, because she solved impossible cases. Several newspapers once called her Asterisk, the quiet commander. Asterisk, she disliked the nickname. Real leadership, she believed, should never depend on attention. It should depend on trust. 3 weeks earlier, the police commissioner had called her personally. Maya, I have a difficult assignment. She smiled. You usually do. The 18th precinct. Her expression became thoughtful. I've read the reports. So have I. Complaints had increased. Community trust had fallen. Internal conflicts were growing worse every year. The commissioner sighed. I don't just need a good investigator. I need someone who can rebuild a culture. Maya didn't answer immediately. Then she asked one question. Can I arrive without announcing my position? The commissioner laughed softly. I expected you'd ask that. If officers know I'm coming as captain, they'll behave differently. I want to meet the real department. Permission was granted immediately. Only the commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and the city's mayor knew the full plan. Every other officer believed Maya Carter was nothing more than another transfer. Exactly as she intended. Back inside the evidence room, Maya opened the small leather notebook she carried everywhere. She wrote quietly, Observation 1 * public humiliation is accepted as entertainment. Observation 2 * junior officers hesitate before challenging senior officers. Observation 3 * authority appears to matter more than professionalism. She paused before adding another sentence. Potential for change remains high. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. The evidence room door opened slightly. A young Hispanic officer stepped inside. He looked uncomfortable. Officer Carter. Maya smiled warmly. Yes, I'm Kevin Alvarez. He shifted awkwardly. I just wanted to say. He glanced toward the hallway. I'm sorry about what happened out there. Maya closed her notebook. You don't owe me an apology. Kevin looked embarrassed. I should have said something. You wanted to. He nodded. I just didn't. Maya studied him for a moment. She recognized the expression immediately. Not fear. Conflict. The kind experienced by good people working inside unhealthy cultures. She smiled gently. The hardest part of leadership isn't speaking. Kevin looked confused. It's deciding to speak before everyone else does. Kevin slowly nodded. I'll remember that. As he turned to leave, Maya watched him quietly. For the first time that morning, she had found something more valuable than spotless evidence shelves. She had found hope. Because changing a department never began with policies. It always began with one person willing to choose courage over comfort. Outside the evidence room, Sergeant Collins was already preparing another opportunity to humiliate the quiet new officer. He had no idea that every decision he made was quietly shaping the report that would determine his own future. Sergeant Richard Collins had spent 25 years building a reputation that everyone inside the 18th precinct recognized. Some called him experienced. Others called him tough. Privately, many simply called him untouchable. He had survived 4 police chiefs, countless departmental reforms, and more internal investigations than most officers even knew about. None of them had ever changed him. In his mind, policing was simple. Good officers took control. Weak officers asked questions. And respect was something you demanded, not something you earned. That philosophy had shaped every rookie who had ever walked through the precinct doors. Unfortunately, it had also shaped the culture. Late that morning, Collins stepped into the squad room carrying a stack of incident reports. Listen up. Conversations immediately stopped. He tossed the reports onto the briefing table. We've got paperwork from last night's burglary detail. He glanced around the room before his eyes landed on Maya. Carter. She looked up. Yes, Sergeant. Congratulations. Several officers smirked, already sensing another joke. You've officially graduated. A few chuckles spread across the room. Maya walked toward him. What would you like me to do? Collins handed her nearly 3 inches of paperwork. I want every report organized. Alphabetically, chronologically, and cross-referenced. He leaned closer. If you finish before lunch, I'll find you something even more exciting. Laughter erupted throughout the room. Officer Kevin Alvarez looked down at his desk. Officer Melissa Turner, a young white patrol officer sitting nearby, forced a smile she didn't truly feel. Neither of them laughed. Maya accepted the stack without hesitation. I'll take care of it. Collins folded his arms. That's it. She met his eyes. Is there anything else, Sergeant? He looked almost disappointed. He had expected frustration. Excuses. An argument. Instead, she remained completely composed. As Maya carried the paperwork toward an empty desk, Collins turned back to the room. You know what worries me? Nobody answered. We keep getting officers who look good on paper. He shrugged dramatically. But paperwork doesn't save lives. Several veterans nodded. One officer laughed. Collins continued. This job isn't about degrees. It's about instincts. He looked directly toward Maya. And instincts can't be taught. The room fell silent. Maya calmly placed the reports on the desk before speaking. May I ask a question? Collins smiled sarcastically. Go ahead. What makes a good police officer? The veterans exchanged amused glances. Collins answered immediately. Experience. Maya nodded. What else? Confidence. She nodded again. And? He frowned, knowing when to act. Maya smiled politely. I agree. Collins looked satisfied. Then she added quietly, but I'd include one more quality. The room became still. Humility. Several officers looked up. Collins crossed his arms. Humility. She nodded. The willingness to believe we could be wrong. A veteran detective scoffed. This isn't philosophy class. Maya remained calm. No, it's public service. The detective looked away. Collins took 2 slow steps toward her. Let me explain something. His voice became noticeably colder. When you're standing in front of an armed suspect, humility gets officers killed. Maya answered almost immediately. And arrogance gets innocent people hurt. Silence. The sentence landed like a hammer. Nobody laughed this time. Kevin glanced toward Melissa. Melissa stared at Maya with growing curiosity. Colin's face tightened. You think you know this job? No. I think every day gives us something new to learn. He shook his head. That's exactly what's wrong with younger officers. You people think policing can be learned from books. Maya looked at him steadily. No, Sergeant. It can only be learned from people. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The squad room had become so quiet that the distant buzz of fluorescent lights seemed unusually loud. Finally, Collins gave a sarcastic laugh. Well, he looked around the room. Our new philosopher can finish those reports while the rest of us handle real police work. The veterans grabbed their gear. Within minutes, patrol cars began leaving the station one after another. Maya quietly sat at the desk. Instead of reacting to the insults, she opened the first report and immediately noticed multiple missing witness statements, incomplete evidence logs, and procedural errors that should never have passed review. She reached for a red pen. Not to criticize, to correct. Outside, Collins climbed into his patrol SUV convinced he had already figured Maya Carter out. He believed she was nothing more than an educated rookie who lacked real-world experience. He had absolutely no idea that before the day was over, the woman he dismissed as inexperienced would become the very leader responsible for evaluating every officer under his command. The squad room had barely settled into its afternoon rhythm when the emergency alarm shattered the silence. Every radio inside the precinct erupted at once. Asterisk, all available units respond immediately. Asterisk, asterisk, possible armed robbery in progress. Asterisk, asterisk, multiple hostages reported. Asterisk, the room transformed instantly. Officers grabbed body armor, radios, rifles, and medical kits. Chairs scraped across the floor as patrol officers rushed toward the garage. Dispatchers answered 3 different emergency calls simultaneously while digital maps flashed across the command screen. Sergeant Richard Collins immediately stepped into command. Let's move. Within seconds, nearly every officer was running. Maya Carter stood from her desk, calmly setting down the red pen she had been using to correct incomplete reports. She reached for her patrol vest. Before she could put it on, Collins pointed directly at her. You. She stopped. Yes, Sergeant. Stay here. The room became noticeably quieter. Officer Kevin Alvarez looked toward Collins in surprise. Sir. Collins didn't even glance at him. Carter isn't responding. Maya spoke respectfully. I am fully qualified for field operations. Collins gave a sarcastic laugh. Qualified. He shook his head. This isn't the academy. We've got armed suspects and frightened civilians. He pointed toward the communications desk. You'll answer phones. Several veteran officers exchanged amused smiles. One muttered quietly, probably the safest place for her. A few laughed. Kevin frowned. Sergeant. Collins cut him off. I've already made my decision. Maya didn't argue. She simply nodded. Understood. Collins grabbed his rifle. Everyone else. Move. The garage doors rolled open. Police cruisers accelerated into the streets, lights flashing across nearby buildings as sirens echoed through downtown Chicago. Within less than 2 minutes, the once crowded precinct had become almost empty. Only Maya, 2 dispatchers, and 1 civilian records clerk remained inside. The emergency radio continued transmitting nonstop. Asterisk, Unit 12 approaching north entrance. Asterisk, asterisk, suspect believed armed with an assault rifle. Asterisk, asterisk, possible explosive device. Reported. Asterisk, Maya quietly walked toward the digital operations map mounted on the wall. Her eyes moved carefully across the building layout transmitted from responding units. She noticed something immediately. The officers were surrounding the bank from 3 sides. The 4th side, the underground parking garage, had no containment unit. She listened again. Asterisk, suspects possibly moving hostages toward lower level. Asterisk, Maya's expression changed slightly. She picked up a grease pencil and marked the map. The dispatch supervisor looked over. What are you doing? Looking. For what? The escape route. The dispatcher studied the map. I don't understand. Maya pointed calmly. If I were leading this robbery, I wouldn't leave through the front. She traced a line toward the underground garage. I'd move everyone below ground. The dispatcher looked uncertain. The field commander didn't mention that. He doesn't know yet. Maya picked up the radio. Before she could speak, hesitation crossed the dispatcher's face. Sergeant Collins ordered you to stay off tactical communications. Maya slowly lowered the microphone. She respected the chain of command, even when the chain was flawed. Instead, she handed the marked map to the dispatcher. Can you transmit this as an observation? The dispatcher looked at the drawing. You really think they'll escape through here? I think they're already trying. Several long seconds passed. Finally, the dispatcher keyed the microphone. Command dispatch. A voice answered immediately. Go ahead. Possible recommendation from station analysis. The map was electronically transmitted. Silence followed. Then another voice came across the radio. Stand by. Nearly 30 seconds passed. Inside the precinct, no one spoke. Suddenly, frantic shouting erupted over the tactical channel. Asterisk, movement. Asterisk, asterisk, garage level. Asterisk, asterisk, suspects heading underground. Asterisk, asterisk, intercept. Intercept. Asterisk, the dispatcher's eyes widened. She looked slowly toward Maya. Moments later, another transmission arrived. Dispatch, whoever identified that escape route, tell them they just saved 6 hostages. The room fell completely silent. The dispatcher stared at Maya in disbelief. You saw that. From here, Maya looked back toward the operations map. I've seen that tactic before. Outside, Sergeant Collins still believed the successful interception had been nothing more than fortunate timing. He had no idea that the woman he ordered to answer phones had quietly prevented one of the worst hostage disasters the city had faced in years. Nor did he realize that within the next hour, police headquarters would arrive with news that would change the future of every officer inside the 18th precinct forever. Shaken but unharmed. News helicopters circled overhead as television crews gathered behind police tape. Captain Lewis Henderson, the on-scene incident commander, removed his tactical headset and looked toward Collins. Who called in that garage prediction? Collins shrugged. I assumed dispatch. Lewis shook his head. No. They said it came from someone inside your precinct. Collins frowned. I'll find out. Before either man could continue, Collins' radio crackled again. Asterisk, Sergeant Collins, return to the precinct immediately. Asterisk, the voice belonged to the Deputy Commissioner's executive assistant. Collins glanced toward Lewis. What happened? I don't know. The Deputy Commissioner just arrived. Collins raised an eyebrow. Today? Immediately. The drive back to the station took less than 10 minutes. During the entire trip, Collins couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious tactical recommendation. He convinced himself it had probably come from dispatch analysts downtown. Certainly not from anyone inside his own station. Especially not Officer Maya Carter. When he entered the precinct, something immediately felt different. The squad room was completely silent. Every officer had already returned. Nobody was talking. Nobody was joking. Kevin Alvarez stood near the front of the room with an expression Collins had never seen before. Melissa Turner looked equally nervous. At the far end of the room stood Deputy Commissioner Harold Bennett, one of the most respected leaders in the Chicago Police Department. Every officer immediately stood at attention. At ease, Bennett said calmly. Collins walked forward. Sir. The Deputy Commissioner nodded. Sergeant Collins. I understand there was an emergency. There was. Bennett looked around the room before asking one simple question. Where is Officer Maya Carter? The room became strangely quiet. Collins answered casually. Evidence room, sir. No. I assigned her paperwork afterward. Bennett smiled slightly. I'm not asking where you assigned her. I'm asking where Captain Maya Carter is. The words echoed through the squad room. Nobody moved. Collins blinked. I'm sorry, sir. Captain. Bennett looked genuinely surprised. You weren't informed? No one answered. The Deputy Commissioner slowly removed a sealed envelope from his briefcase. This morning's confidential appointment orders. He handed them directly to Collins. Collins opened the envelope. Inside rested an official personnel photograph. The woman in the picture wore a Chicago police dress uniform. Her silver captain's bars rested proudly on her shoulders. Below the photograph appeared a single name. Captain Maya Carter, commanding officer, 18th Precinct. Collins stared at the page. Then read it again. His heartbeat suddenly felt louder than the room itself. That's... He slowly turned toward the evidence room door. Impossible. At that exact moment, the door quietly opened. Maya stepped into the squad room carrying the same leather notebook she had carried all day. She looked exactly the same. The same calm expression. The same quiet confidence. The same neatly pressed uniform. Nothing about her had changed. Except everyone else's understanding. Deputy Commissioner Bennett immediately walked toward her. Without hesitation. He came to full attention. Every officer watched in stunned silence. Then Bennett raised his right hand. A perfect salute. Good afternoon, Captain Carter. Time itself seemed to stop. Kevin's mouth slowly fell open. Melissa covered her lips with one trembling hand. Several veteran officers looked at one another in complete disbelief. Collins stood frozen. Every sarcastic remark, every humiliating assignment, every laugh, every assumption, all of it came rushing back at once. Bennett lowered his salute and smiled warmly. Captain, I hope your first day gave you an honest picture of this precinct. Maya looked slowly around the room. She met the eyes of every officer. No anger, no satisfaction, no revenge. Only quiet honesty. Yes, Commissioner. She paused. It told me everything I needed to know. No one dared speak. Because every officer in that room suddenly realized the quiet black woman they had mocked all morning had never been a rookie. She had been evaluating every one of them from the moment she walked through the front door. And now, the first decision she made as their new commanding officer would determine the future of every badge in the room. Silence settled over the squad room like a heavy fog. For several long seconds, no one moved. The same officers who had laughed only hours earlier now stood perfectly still, unable to meet Captain Maya Carter's eyes. The room that had once echoed with sarcasm and casual jokes suddenly felt painfully small. Deputy Commissioner Harold Bennett looked around the precinct before speaking. I believe introductions are now in order. He stepped beside Maya. Officers. His voice carried across the room. This is Captain Maya Carter, your new commanding officer. Effective immediately. No applause followed. No one spoke. Every officer was trapped inside the same uncomfortable realization. They had spent an entire morning judging the woman who had already been chosen to lead them. Sergeant Richard Collins felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. 25 years of experience. Gone. Every confident assumption. Gone. He slowly removed his patrol cap. His voice barely rose above a whisper. Captain. Maya turned toward him. Collins swallowed hard. I owe you an apology. She didn't interrupt. I judged you before I knew you. He looked down at the badge on his chest. I embarrassed you in front of this entire precinct. He paused, struggling to continue. I forgot what this badge is supposed to stand for. The room remained silent. Every officer waited to see how Maya would respond. Some expected anger. Others expected immediate disciplinary action. After all, no one would have blamed her. She had every reason to make an example of Sergeant Collins. Instead, Maya took one slow step toward him. Her voice remained calm. Sergeant. Collins slowly looked up. Do you know what disappointed me most today? He shook his head. It wasn't the jokes. It wasn't the paperwork. It wasn't even the public humiliation. Another long pause. It was watching good officers stay silent. Her eyes slowly moved across the room. They rested briefly on Melissa Turner. Then Kevin Alvarez. Then every veteran officer standing behind them. When disrespect becomes normal, silence becomes permission. No one dared argue. Because every person in that room knew she was right. Maya walked slowly toward the center of the squad room. I've served beside soldiers. I've served beside federal agents. I've served beside police officers from every background imaginable. She looked around the room once more. The The strongest teams I ever led had one thing in common. They protected each other. Not each other's egos. Each other's integrity. The room remained perfectly still. Kevin felt a lump forming in his throat. Melissa quietly wiped away a tear. Even Collins couldn't lift his eyes. Maya reached into her bag. She removed 4 polished silver captain's bars. Without saying a word, she attached them to the shoulders of her uniform shirt. The simple gesture transformed the room. Only moments earlier she had looked like another patrol officer. Now she looked every bit the commanding officer headquarters had chosen. She buttoned her uniform jacket, straightened the collar, then quietly stepped behind the briefing podium. I didn't wear these this morning. She gently touched the captain's insignia. Because I wanted to meet the real department. A few officers lowered their heads even further. And I did. Nobody questioned her. Nobody defended themselves. Deputy Commissioner Bennett folded his arms, silently observing. He had watched dozens of command changes during his career. Most new captains began with authority. Maya had begun with humility. She looked directly at every officer. My job isn't to remind you that I'm the captain. My job is to remind every person who walks through these doors that they're human first. Her words filled every corner of the room. A badge gives us authority. She paused. But character earns respect. No one applauded. The silence itself carried more meaning than applause ever could. Finally, Maya smiled gently. Tomorrow morning, we begin again. Not as strangers. Not as enemies. As one department. Kevin slowly stood a little taller. Melissa smiled through her tears. Even Sergeant Collins felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Perhaps. Leadership wasn't about proving who had power. Perhaps. It was about helping others become better than they were yesterday. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes true leadership begins with respect, not rank. The next morning, the atmosphere inside the 18th precinct felt completely different. The laughter was gone. The sarcastic remarks had disappeared. Even the usual conversations were quieter than normal. Officers arrived early, carefully avoiding eye contact with Captain Maya Carter as she reviewed overnight reports in her office. No one knew exactly what to expect from their new commanding officer after the previous day's humiliation. Some feared disciplinary hearings. Others expected mandatory suspensions. Sergeant Richard Collins expected both. Instead, at precisely 7:30 a.m., Captain Carter walked into the briefing room carrying nothing but a tablet and a cup of black coffee. She looked around the room before speaking. Good morning. The officers answered almost in unison. Good morning, Captain. Maya nodded. Let's get to work. No lecture. No reminder about yesterday. No mention of the embarrassment. Just work. Several officers exchanged surprised glances. Perhaps she truly intended to move forward. Halfway through the morning briefing, the dispatch center interrupted. Every radio inside the room crackled at once. Asterisk, all available units respond. Asterisk, asterisk, active shooter reported at Lincoln Square Community Center. Asterisk, asterisk, multiple civilians trapped inside. Asterisk, the room instantly exploded into motion. Officers reached for rifles, ballistic helmets, and tactical vests. Captain Carter was already moving. Kevin. Yes, Captain. You'll take Bravo team through the east entrance. Yes, ma'am. Melissa. She looked up immediately. You'll establish evacuation corridors. Understood. Maya turned toward Sergeant Collins. You'll be with me. Collins looked genuinely surprised. Captain. You still trust me? She met his eyes. I trust the badge. Now let's earn it. Those words struck him harder than anything she could have said. Minutes later, 6 patrol vehicles raced through downtown Chicago with lights flashing and sirens echoing between buildings. Inside the lead SUV, Maya calmly studied the building blueprint displayed on her tablet. Community center. 2 floors. Gymnasium. Children's classrooms. A cafeteria. Possible 70 civilians still inside. She closed the tablet. Collins. Yes, Captain. What's our priority? He answered immediately. Neutralize the suspect. Maya shook her head. Our priority is bringing everyone home alive. Collins quietly nodded. I understand. As they arrived, chaos surrounded the building. Parents screamed behind police barricades. Teachers rushed injured children toward waiting ambulances. Gunshots echoed somewhere inside. Several patrol officers had already taken cover behind squad cars. Captain Carter stepped out of the vehicle. Without raising her voice, she immediately took command. Perimeter secure? Yes, Captain. Medical. Standing by. Sniper coverage? In position. She looked toward the terrified school principal. How many children are still inside? The woman struggled to answer. Maybe 20. Maya didn't hesitate. Kevin. South hallway. Melissa. Medical evacuation route. She looked toward Collins. You and I are going in. Collins stared at her. Captain. That's too dangerous. She calmly checked the magazine in her sidearm. So is asking someone else to do it. For the first time since meeting Maya Carter, Collins saw exactly why headquarters had chosen her. She never asked officers to take risks she wasn't willing to take herself. They entered the building together. The hallway was filled with smoke alarms and terrified voices. Children cried behind locked classroom doors. Broken glass covered the floor. Another gunshot echoed from upstairs. Maya immediately raised one hand. Hold. She listened. Not to the noise. To the silence between it. Then she pointed toward a side corridor. The suspect isn't upstairs. Collins frowned. How do you know? He wants us to think he is. She moved carefully toward the cafeteria. Seconds later, a man carrying a rifle suddenly emerged from behind the kitchen entrance. Before Collins could react, Maya stepped directly into the suspect's line of sight. Police. The gunman turned toward her. In that split second, Collins tackled two frightened children behind a concrete wall. The suspect fired. The round struck a metal support column only inches from Maya. She never flinched. Instead, she calmly redirected his attention long enough for the SWAT team to enter through the rear service hallway. Within moments, the suspect surrendered without another shot being fired. Every child walked out alive. Outside the community center, exhausted officers watched Captain Carter comfort a terrified little girl before quietly handing her back to her mother. Sergeant Collins stood silently nearby. Only yesterday, he had believed Maya Carter was nothing more than an inexperienced rookie. Today, she had risked her own life to save his. And in that moment, he realized something no promotion, no medal, and no years of experience had ever taught him. The greatest leaders never stand behind their people. They stand beside them. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes courage and compassion are the true marks of leadership. The applause that greeted the officers outside Lincoln Square Community Center wasn't for one person. It was for every life that had been saved. Parents embraced their children through tears of relief. News cameras captured images of officers carrying frightened students to safety while paramedics treated the injured. Reporters praised the flawless coordination that had prevented another tragedy. Yet inside the 18th precinct later that afternoon, no one was celebrating. The atmosphere was quiet, reflective. Every officer understood that the successful operation had revealed something far more important than tactical excellence. It had revealed the character of their new captain. Captain Maya Carter stood alone in her office, finishing the after-action report. Her uniform still carried faint traces of dust from the community center. A small scratch marked the sleeve of her jacket where a piece of shattered concrete had struck during the operation. She hadn't even noticed it. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Come in. The door opened slowly. Sergeant Richard Collins stepped inside. For the first time in 25 years, he looked uncertain inside his own precinct. He removed his patrol cap and held it respectfully in front of him. Captain. Maya looked up from the report. Come in, Sergeant. Collins closed the door behind him. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, he reached into a folder he had been carrying. I've completed the paperwork. He placed a sealed envelope on Maya's desk. My resignation. Maya glanced at the envelope but made no attempt to open it. Collins continued. I publicly humiliated you. I encouraged others to do the same. I ignored professionalism. And yesterday, he lowered his eyes. I almost ignored your judgment during the hostage situation. His voice became heavier. If you hadn't identified that escape route, those hostages would have died. He swallowed hard. Then today, you stepped in front of an armed suspect. You protected me. His voice cracked. I don't deserve this badge anymore. Silence filled the office. Maya slowly folded the report she had been writing. She looked at Collins for a long moment before gently sliding the envelope back across the desk. I won't accept it. Collins stared at her. Captain, I've earned this. You've earned accountability. She answered calmly. Not abandonment. He frowned. I don't understand. Maya stood and walked toward the large window overlooking the squad room below. Young officers were already discussing the morning's operation. Melissa was helping a rookie complete paperwork. Kevin was explaining evacuation procedures to another patrol officer. Maya smiled faintly. Do you know why headquarters sent me here? Collins quietly shook his head. They didn't hire me to remove difficult people. She turned toward him. They sent me to change a culture. She paused before continuing. If every experienced officer resigned after making a serious mistake, who would teach the next generation how to avoid making the same ones? Collins stood speechless. Maya walked closer. I've read your personnel file. His eyebrows lifted slightly. 25 years. Over 600 felony arrests. 3 medals for bravery. Dozens of letters from families whose lives you changed. She looked directly into his eyes. That man still exists. Collins felt tears beginning to form. I haven't acted like him. No, you haven't. She nodded gently. But today, I saw him again. The room became completely silent. Collins slowly lowered his head. I don't know how to repay you. You don't. Maya smiled warmly. You pay it forward. He looked up. Starting tomorrow, every rookie assigned to this precinct becomes your responsibility. He blinked. My responsibility? You'll mentor them. You'll teach them tactics. You'll teach them procedure. She paused. But most importantly, you'll teach them never to mistake confidence for character. A quiet laugh escaped Collins for the first time in 2 days. I think I'm finally ready to learn that lesson myself. Maya extended her hand. This precinct doesn't need perfect officers. It needs honest leaders. Collins shook her hand firmly. Outside the office, several officers quietly witnessed the moment through the glass. None of them heard every word. They didn't need to, because they had just seen something even more powerful than justice. They had witnessed forgiveness transforming into leadership. And from that moment forward, the culture of the 18th precinct began changing, not because officers feared their captain, but because they wanted to become the kind of leaders she believed they could be. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes that giving people a second chance can change far more than punishment ever will. 1 year later, the 18th precinct no longer sounded the way it once had. The sharp laughter that had once echoed through the squad room had been replaced by calm conversations, respectful greetings, and officers helping one another prepare for the day ahead. The atmosphere felt lighter. Not because the job had become easier, because the people had changed. At precisely 7 a.m., the morning briefing ended as officers gathered their equipment and prepared for patrol. Near the entrance stood a group of brand-new academy graduates. Their uniforms still looked stiff. Their boots shined with the unmistakable polish of officers reporting for their very first assignment. Some looked excited. Others looked terrified. Standing before them was Sergeant Richard Collins, the same man who, only 1 year earlier, had believed fear created discipline. Now he smiled warmly. Welcome to the 18th precinct. The rookies stood at attention. Collins looked around the room before speaking again. Before any of you hit the streets, there's one story you need to hear. The room became quiet. I've worn this badge for 26 years. I've made arrests. I've received medals. I've trained officers. He paused. But the greatest lesson of my career came on the day I believed I knew everything. Several younger officers leaned forward. I judged someone before learning who she really was. I confused experience with wisdom. I mistook authority for leadership. He smiled faintly. And I was completely wrong. No one interrupted. Every officer in the room knew exactly who he was talking about. Collins pointed toward the bronze plaque mounted beside the American flag. Every rookie turned toward it. Engraved in polished metal were the words Captain Maya Carter had introduced on her very first day. Leadership begins with respect. Beneath it, a second sentence had been added months later. Every person deserves dignity before judgment. Collins nodded toward the plaque. Those aren't just words. They're our standard. They're why this precinct became the highest-rated community policing unit in the city. He looked directly at the newest officers. If you remember, nothing else. Remember this. The person standing in front of you may know something you don't. So treat everyone with respect. Around the room, veteran officers quietly smiled. Melissa Turner now served as a field training officer. She had become known throughout the department for mentoring young officers with patience instead of pressure. Kevin Alvarez had recently been promoted to detective after leading several successful investigations using the calm, methodical approach Maya had encouraged from the beginning. The culture had changed. Not overnight, but one decision at a time. One conversation at a time. One act of respect at a time. From the second-floor balcony overlooking the squad room, Captain Maya Carter watched the briefing come to an end. She stood quietly with a cup of coffee in one hand and a folder of community outreach reports in the other. Deputy Commissioner Harold Bennett stepped beside her. "You've done something remarkable here." Maya smiled softly. "I didn't do it alone." He looked toward the officers below. "They respect you." She shook her head gently. "They respect each other. And that's the real victory." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Morning sunlight poured through the station's tall windows, casting long golden reflections across the polished floor. Below, Collins laughed with a nervous rookie while helping him adjust his duty belt. Melissa patiently answered questions from another new officer. Kevin walked past carrying case files, stopping briefly to hold the door open for a civilian visitor. Simple moments. Ordinary moments. The kind that quietly define a culture. Maya closed the folder and picked up her patrol cap. As she walked through the squad room, every officer stood. Not because departmental regulations required it. Not because she wore 4 captain's bars on her shoulders. But because she had earned something far greater than obedience. She had earned their trust. She returned each greeting with the same warm smile she had offered on her very first morning, a smile that no amount of ridicule had ever taken away. Outside, the city was waking to another ordinary day. Inside the 18th precinct, extraordinary leadership had become ordinary behavior. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. Because badges can command authority. Titles can command obedience. But only compassion, humility, and unwavering integrity can inspire people to become better than they were yesterday. Kindness isn't weakness, it is the strongest form of leadership.